Welcome to Tech Bites with Ash, where we discuss trends in digital technology that support true business outcomes. I'm Ashu Bhatia, a consultant, an author, and a practitioner of all practical insights on your technology investments. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tech Bites with Ash. Today I've had the great fortune to talk to a very good friend, a very deep professional in digital technology, and literally a think tank by himself when it comes to anything digital. Rob Milstead, the current CIO at Orange, which is a faith-based organization providing a lot of digital technologies to all organizations around the world. Rob has held a phenomenal set of positions around his career: CIO, Chief Digital Officer for many Fortune 500 companies. I've known him over the years when I was working as a consultant for one of his big projects in trying to assess digital technology and apply it all across the enterprise. Apart from this part, he does a lot of early stage AI investing. He is also a part of an advisor group, the Creative Destruction Labs, which is more like a startup incubator program. He is phenomenal when it comes to understanding the application and the practical innovation of where technology brings true business outcomes. Thank you again. Thanks so much for taking the time. Good morning to you. I know it's good evening in this part of the world. I really appreciate, like you and I talked about, taking the time out of your busy schedule and really sharing some things with my audience around digital transformation. Very, very heavily used buzzword these days, if you will. But before we even get into all of that, right, what I like to do is, as I mentioned to you, the whole goal of this channel is really to get to the audience. It's good use of their time. And so that they really walk away with this time that they spend with one or two things that they would learn, right? And I'm confident with your experience, there's so much to learn, frankly, that I'm looking forward to a conversation and kind of doing a deep dive. I've already kind of did a little bit of intro on your bio, but before we even start, I think if I go back in time, I think I'm trying to recollect when you and I first met. We've known each other over the years, but I think this was right before COVID, when I was doing a lot of work for GPC and Napa, and you were driving the whole enterprise digital transformation. I think that's when we met. We've always kept in touch. I've learned so much from you. So again, I just wanted to tell the audience that I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm sure they'll enjoy as well. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's, of course, great to have kept in touch with you over the years. I also get a lot from you in hearing your perspectives from what you're learning from other clients around the world. So
thank you so much. And I think before we start, Rob, just so that the audience gets to know you a little better, where did you grow up? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey, because I mean, this leadership role is a very significant role. There's a lot of things that you do professionally, but I'm sure that all of this culminates on the journey that we take, both on professional, personal life. So just curious, where did you grow up? How did that bring you to do this position today?
Yep, great question. And I think an important place to start for sure. I grew up in Florida, which is not the important part. What the important part is that both of my parents were educators. They played different roles. My father was a Spanish teacher and then guidance counselor. My mother was a biology teacher and then became an administrator. Ultimately, she was the deputy superintendent for Orange County Public Schools, which is Orlando. I think the reason that's relevant is I really enjoyed seeing them influence other people, and that even though they had very specific things that they were teaching, it was really about whether or not they were communicating effectively. And as a 10-year-old, I didn't necessarily understand that, but as I started to grow in my own roles, watching them interact with people really, really did influence the way that I think I need to communicate. And so as my roles have evolved, which I'm sure we can get into, but it's the human side that is really my measure of success, whether that's growing individual people or learning how to communicate with a board or a CEO to get them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, et cetera. It's really that human side that has the biggest impact, I believe.
Excellent. I'm telling you, I can't wait to get into the meat of things, but I think I heard you say people, communication, and human, right? Those were the words that you repeated. And I love it. Really think that when it comes to digital transformation, like we'll jump into it, a lot of that comes from those, I think, those sentiments and those ideas, because without that, you're not affecting the change. And I know that from your experience, from your navigation, just reading about you, there's so much change agency that you brought, and those are the core principles, really. And so we'll definitely dive into that. Before we even go in there, having such a background, as you said, kind of growing in a house full of educators, teachers who want to influence other people and bring the best out of them, where would you recharge sometimes, right? When you grow in such an environment, there's always, there's a bar that you look at your parents or your siblings and say, I got to do this, I got to do it even better. So sometimes, like an athlete, you got to train, but you got to, rest up and recharge. So what are the things that you do in your life just to, so that you can recharge, rethink, and then go again?
Yeah, I think through the years, I have really enjoyed the variety of personality profiles, information about who you are, what makes you tick, etc. Whether it's Myers-Briggs or Working Genius or Right Path or variety of tools like that. I really love being introspective. And so for me, you specifically mentioned the word recharge, which is what resonates. I am by nature an introvert, which a lot of people are surprised. And I think they have in their mind a picture of what an introvert is. They sit in the corner of a room. They're not necessarily confident or vocal. And what I've learned through the years is that an introvert is just around where you use energy and where you recharge energy. So your point of recharge, I just need time to decompress. It doesn't mean that I don't love groups of people. It doesn't mean that I haven't spoken in front of thousands of people and get energized by that. It just means that that's how I deplete my battery. And so for me, finding time to do things by myself, whether that's read, play golf, it's one of the reasons I love golf. It's an individual sport. Yeah. The things that help me are where I'm allowed to kind of spend some time back on myself and then refocus on what I need to be doing as I get into my next role. That was really important too. I started my career in consulting. You're not always sure of what the right answer is when you're a consultant, but you have to play a role of facilitator or problem solver. And so learning how to act like an outgoing extrovert, even though that wasn't my natural tendency, I think I learned some of those skills. I would just find myself exhausted at the end of the day playing that role. And then I would have to find time to go recharge. So to me, that was just, step away from being around other people and have a chance to actually do something for myself and take a break that way.
And that's great. That's great because, as you said, you've been on this side of consulting, so you know that collaboration is extreme when you're doing that and advising, your clients. But you've also driven real transformation for a lot of companies that you work for. So let's just dive deep into that, because I think the topic for the day that I wanted to cover with you is definitely digital transformation and the role of a CIO that you're playing right now. You've done a lot of chief digital officer roles as well elsewhere. That this role has evolved, it's morphed, it's changed, and it's become more central to this whole transformation. But even before we go there, I'll be honest with you, I think I started this channel with the definition of digital transformation. And I told people that if I meet 100 people, I'll get 100 definitions of digital transformation. So just curious, based on a phenomenal journey that you've had as yet, what is your take on this whole word, digital transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you're right to observe that it means a lot of different things. I think when it initially started, I'll go back in time, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, and this is probably still the definition I use. It's a reorientation to think about the organization from the outside in. And so often you think about customer centricity. A lot of companies, that was a 180-degree turn from the way the company thought about itself from an org chart perspective. If you stop and think about the way the customer experiences your organization and you identify all the different opportunities there are for friction where the customer struggles with something. It could be a beautiful buying experience, but the invoicing process is a mess. That is a great example of friction. And often it was the chief digital officer or chief transformation officer that had the role of championing, looking from the outside in, to identify where is there friction, but also where is there then opportunity for the company to potentially drive revenue or reduce costs, et cetera. So that customer centricity, I think, is the most important thing in my definition of what transformation still looks like.
Absolutely. And I think like you said, and this is great, I'll have to kind of put this in the summary, that outside in, right? Because a lot of us, we get busy with a lot of things that we do from within the company. We know that customer is important. We've kind of been drilled into that. But when you really look at customer centricity, I think it's the lens that you mentioned, that coming in from the outside, what was that experience right through the whole journey? And even for a small thing, like you said, invoicing, if that's a pain or there's a friction there, that affects the whole experience in totality. So having that lens all the time outside in, I think it's a great way to put digital transformation, because as you just highlighted, digital transformation is not about just technology. Yes, it is central, it's enabling, but it's all about how you do business, right? What is your consumer and their customer really looking at? How do you do operations, and how do you engage them and deliver the value, right? And I would say that this, just the way you put it, right? Basically looking at it from a whole journey and eliminating points of friction absolutely creates that transformation that you would need for a company. So, Rob, how does, without sharing, of course, the main things around a company that are more proprietary, any example from all the work that you've done where you've kind of taken such an experience and really used that transformation, and what were some of the challenges that you saw during that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you mentioned technology. I think to start that example, I'll say digital transformation is often tied to technology projects, and not to say that technology hasn't been complicated, but it's gotten easier over the years, quite honestly. You need a great team to understand how all those pieces can potentially fit together. But where I have found success is getting an executive team, because you really, really need strong executive champions. When you ask business teams to start changing and they feel like it interferes with the way that they're getting work done today, you need somebody to be able to go to, whether it's a VP of operations or even the CEO, if they really understand the problem that is attempting to be solved. And so often that is very simple business language. And some of my examples in the past, it was, how do you simply have a customer not have to pick up the phone to understand whether you have inventory in stock? That's a really good example where you can get the business to wrap their head around, oh, we want to reduce phone calls. And there is commercial benefit tied to that, but there's also the customer experience side. They may not be as familiar with the customer benefit, but if you can get them to understand, oh, here's how much money we're spending or efficiency lost in answering X number of phone calls per day per location, you can kind of multiply the math and really understand the business problem. So helping the business understand the fundamental elements that are attempting to be addressed, they don't have to understand the technology roadmap. And in several cases, I actually did not share what the multi-year roadmap looked like, because it looked complicated and maybe it looked expensive as well. And as we all know, businesses don't necessarily like to digest big bites like that. It's kind of the eat the elephant one bite at a time. Right. So we literally have referred to that as a secret master plan, just so that people understood it existed, but we didn't have to share that with everybody. And so getting them to understand kind of phase by phase, what are we doing to improve business problems? In the case that I was mentioning here, it was, can we automate inventory view and shipping information? So rather than having to pick up the phone call and then wait for a phone call back or an email back, just say yes to the customer. Think of that Amazon experience today. Yeah. One of the things they do so amazingly well is they have a view of inventory across their ecosystem, and they have accurate shipping information. So that was really, really important. It is keep it as simple as possible so that the business leaders can understand, why are you trying to fix the problem? That proved to be really, really important, because I think it's very natural in a multi-month or even multi-year transformation. Things are going to happen in the business. There's a new acquisition. Something happens from a macro standpoint. To keep the business's attention for multiple quarters is very challenging. So if you can keep them rallied around the simplicity of what you're trying to do to reduce friction, et cetera, that really makes a difference for keeping them aligned, not on the technical details and the complexity, but that fundamental business problem that you're trying to address.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point that you made, because as you said, that if you're speaking their language, they begin to, of course, understand you. It's kind of like English or French or German. But I think other than that, one thing I've noticed, and I don't know what your experience has been, that even over the last 10, 15 years, not to date ourselves, but I think the business also has been reading a little bit about technology. So they've learned a few high-level things of what is cloud, okay, what is AI, what is analytics. So they're trying to learn some of that domain. I think to your point, if you're trying to play the role of, like you have done, bridging that gap between technology and business, as you said, not even sharing the technology plan, not even getting into the guts of the, of the details. Of course, technology always is a little bit of a cost, but depends on how you kind of transition it and bring value to the company. But if you're talking their language of, revenue or cost cutting or more, customer satisfaction, I think that's when the, light bulbs kind of really light up. And that's when you can, as you going back to the earlier point, it's about people, it's about communication. So I think it goes back to your earlier point that those themes are one of the biggest, and that's what helps you, I think, in your role to make the case for the change that you're doing, right? Because I think the other point you made was technology is definitely getting simple. It's getting easier to deploy. But coming to technology, I think just for our audience, I think it makes sense to kind of delve a little deeper into technology. I think your role is always about balancing what new things to do, innovation, etc. But you got to keep the lights on as well. You're running the business because almost everything in business runs on technology these days. So you got to keep the lights on, but you got to innovate as well. And from my experience, I've seen that 70 to 80% of budgets are spent sometimes on just keep the lights on. And a lot of CIOs try to turn the corner. They try to make things efficient and kind of do the balance to maybe 30, 40% on innovation, but it's always a challenge. So have you seen something like that, and what has been your experience?
Yeah, great point. And I agree with you, maybe even sometimes higher. And some examples where I've either come in as a consultant or inherited an organization, it may have been 90% of the budget was spent on operations. Wow. And it's not just where the budget is, it's where does the team have to spend their energy. I think what's interesting is that the business is rarely going to ask for innovation in IT operations. Keep the lights on. That is table stakes, how you build a relationship with the business. You get no praise for having email work all the time, but you sure hear about it when there's a problem, right? So I think one of the things as technology leaders we are responsible for is determining the innovation that has to happen to reduce budget, to make it easier to drive innovation, but it's also reduce the energy that the team is spending. And so in my examples, I have put in place things like alerting. We started to introduce more AI, even as something as simple as what does your help desk ticketing process look like? There are small innovations. It doesn't always have to be about capital T transformation. Sometimes there's really small things that will help move the needle. And your job as a leader is to help your IT operations leaders build a plan to introduce some of those small changes along the way. And I've literally had OKRs for my teams in the past where it is simply trying to change the percentage from 80% to operations to 70% operations. So it's not big, huge transformation, but if you break that into hours per week or hours per month, if you can move the needle down so that it's only 70% of their energy on operations, you just created time for innovation. Where IT can help change the perception of trust with the business and really be invited to the table more strategically. So that table stakes things, again, the business is rarely going to ask for, and unless there's friction there. But you as a leader have to sort of embrace, hey, we're going to have to innovate here. We're going to have to use metrics to determine whether or not we're moving the needle the right way. Can we bring costs down? Can we bring time down, time spent down, et cetera? That's really where you're going to free up time to really be involved in the more strategic elements of what the business is trying to do. And in my past, just one last comment, I have loved when I have been able to build new things. And who doesn't love to build new things? But to do that is really, showing that you are getting all, not just passing grades, but sometimes, straight A's and all of the kind of core metrics that keep the lights on. Because again, the business isn't necessarily even going to know what to ask. But when there is a problem, that firefighting, it becomes obvious that the team wasn't doing what they needed to be doing. Could be a cyber issue. It could be, too many complaints about how long it takes to turn a ticket around. Those are the things you don't want to catch you off guard. So if you can stay on top of those keep the lights on metrics, then it frees up time for you to do more strategic things for the business.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Rob. I think if I look at what you're saying, is you're saying that sometimes your role as a CIO is to first kind of make your own IT organization healthy and stronger. So as you said, like going that to, you need an A plus in your own organization, and once you get the straight A's is when you can start saying, hey, why are you a B or C here? Or pretty much another analogy is like get healthy within your own organization and then stay healthy and then ask for others to come in. So that's a great point, because the first thing you control right away is the organization and the spend within that. And as you're getting efficient, and you mentioned alerting and using AI and things like that, that's a great way to look at it, that, hey, let me see where I can be more operationally efficient as the business of technology first, and then kind of go to my business and get a little more efficient. It's just facetious comment that one of my other clients made one day was saying, balancing innovation and keeping the lights on is more like being a parent of a toddler and a teenager at the same time, right? One wants constant attention and the other is always breaking the rules. And I don't know which one to kind of deal with at one time, but it all depends on how you kind of deal with the business and say, hey,
Sure.
This is what you're going to be doing. So that's a great way to say that you start with what you control first, and you kind of make sure that the technology organization gets really efficient, and then you start going outside a little bit, and however you do it depending on the appetite of the company. But I think that raises another question, and we all talk about it in technical lingo. We talk about technology modernization or managing tech debt, right? And I know that the industry is rife with saying, hey, when we walk into any company, whether it's retail or insurance or even banking, there's so much of technology investments already made that there is older things that have to be there that do things in mainframe. And as you said, technology is evolving as we talk right now. So mainframe to client server to cloud, there will always be legacy, but then there's new things. And then that whole legacy modernization is something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people read new things and say, hey, we could just go to the cloud and be done with this, API strategy, etc. But I would love to kind of get a little bit of, from your experience, the 2 or 3 things that you've done and you've seen. How do you manage the technology modernization, especially with the advent of so many new technologies coming in today?
Yeah, it's a great question and critically important, because at some point those old systems are easy to ignore until they break. And then you realize all the work that you've been deferring. I think one of the things that's helped immensely is the advent of the rise of cyber and the need for really taking a critical look at what your defense perimeter looks like. And so things like, the NIST framework, the MITRE framework, I use regularly to help understand what's the consequence or the risk of not doing something. And I'll use as an example, because I've lived this recently, even just ERP version upgrades, that is hard to argue that is about, solving customer friction or revenue driver, et cetera.
Right.
But when you realize that if you don't do an upgrade now, it only gets more complicated. And if you ignore it for too many iterations, the effort required to do that upgrade, it changes dramatically. So you end up, deferring an upgrade for 4 or 5 years. You now have to redo all of your integrations because their APIs have changed. You have to redo your potential web front ends. I'm thinking more like legacy ERP.
Yep. Yeah.
And in some cases, they really are still running old AS400s, old Windows architecture, et cetera. So again, you may even be struggling with having the team around you that even has expertise to do this work. But the longer that you defer it, the more risk it causes, really just across the board. And so I can't say I've, batting 1,000 here, but what I've gotten the teams to understand that I've been leading is that it's better to do it now. And it's, again, the business isn't going to ask for it. You simply have to make time in your roadmap to do some of this foundational work. In one specific example, this isn't quite as complicated as legacy ERP modernization, but even we use Laravel and some of our applications, PHP framework, for example. Well, they update Laravel, once, maybe twice a year, depending on how quickly that. And again, great benefits come with those upgrades. It's really easy to defer, and we found ourselves like 6 versions behind on a Laravel upgrade. And so just getting the team to prioritize and actually doing the due diligence to understand from one version to the next what's changed, You have to do, of course, regression testing, depending on the criticality of the application. It was just a really good example to the team to say, oh, we should have never waited this long. And that was only waiting 3 or 4 years to do a version upgrade of Laravel. I think they now appreciate, oh, we're going to have to do this once a year so that we never fall that far behind because of just how much work it was. So again, I think you have now more things around you to use as examples with your team as to why you should be doing those. And if nothing else, just looking at where you have risks from a cyber standpoint, continuing to upgrade software and infrastructure is just so critically important. And you have to, we talked about adjusting the time spent between operations and new work. That's another great example. You have to do that modernization work as a part of your overall portfolio, or bad things happen, and no one wants that to be the case. So
no, that's a great point. It's funny that, when you were explaining this, I was almost like, I wish I could explain to my teenage kids that it's kind of like cleaning your own room. If you wait too long, you will be overwhelmed. There'll be bugs in your room, and I don't want that, right? Just keep doing it, at least on a weekly basis, if not daily. But to your point, I think because technology's pace, I think it's mind-boggling right now. I mean, we all work in technology, and yet, we have to just keeping up with what's going on. We know that the shiny objects keep coming and going, but to your point, when I talk to CIOs and chief information security officers, as you said, the cost of not doing something, you need to know that, because you need to keep up with that, because there is definitely a cost there. Emails and any back-end operations, anything to do with security. That's all the plumbing and the infrastructure that we need to deal with, that sometimes the business doesn't want to hear, right? But for sure, anything that can go wrong, we've dealt with, data breaches, and there's cases and examples everywhere that the cost there and the time spent there is to prevent those kind of, incidents and etc. So great point there, that absolutely have a very good focus on managing this in a regular basis in your roadmap, instilling that discipline, that some of that is to be done on a quarterly or whatever basis, so that you're keeping up with any kind of vulnerability. So that's awesome. On that topic, though, I think these days, not one business journal we open that you would not see the term AI or Gen AI, right? That everyone, like even the business folks have I think even my grandmother actually knows there's something called Chat GPT that the kids use for homework or something, right? So this technology has exploded. A lot of companies know the power of it. There's tons of pilots happening. I work closely with so many clients doing and following up with this. Have you seen the application of AI or Gen AI for especially IT operations? Because it sounded like your mindset was that when you're taking on IT operations, service management, absolutely apply those principles. But have you seen some of that with the tools or the frameworks out there that you guys are seeing today?
I have been lucky to be involved in early, I'll call it AI, but really it was machine learning, RPA, et cetera. So I've seen from an IT operation standpoint, like how amazing it's been to see such rapid innovation. Where I have seen it used the most is actually in content generation. And the company I work at currently, they generate a lot of material. And so it's a useful tool, not just Chat GPT specifically, but in helping build outlines, brainstorming topics of content for our content generation team to think about things. So definitely really significant use cases on the business side. Where I've been invited to the table is pointing out to them when they're doing things that start to jeopardize the business. So it's great at data analysis as well. And somebody may mistakenly upload a customer list to help them think of, segments to do target marketing to, for example. So because I've been invited to the conversation, I've been able to help them realize the dangers. And we've actually stood up our own LLMs, actually a couple different ones, just to experiment with where there could be benefit. From an IT operations standpoint, I think the term that has really risen in the last year is agentic AI. And so these specific AI tools have very specific functions they do as a part of your workflow. And so that's where I think things like robotic process automation come into play here. What job can you use these agents to help you with that previously may have been a manual step if you had, smartphone forms bouncing around the organization to handle workflow. Employee onboarding is a great example. You can use these these agents to actually go do provisioning for you. So, I think it's quite exciting. Some of it is about the buzz, and you really have to spend the time to determine what's real. But fast forward a year from now, there's going to be many, many examples. Salesforce, their Dreamforce was all about, how you can use these tools in their application suite. So no doubt companies are going to be using these in production very, very soon. I actually think it's a great example where the IT team needs to spend the time to realize where sometimes IT teams can be defensive around why is their process the way that it is. And so sometimes leaders have to get the team to realize, hey, this isn't about being defensive. It's not about justifying how we've gotten to where we've gotten. But if you compare your metrics to other organizations that look similar to yours, there's an easy way to see opportunity for improvement, right? And so that exercise where you can get the team to unify on, hey, we can improve these 3 things, then combined with understanding what is possible in the tools that you already own. You don't have to necessarily go look at investing in new tools or replacing your entire, suite of applications for IT ops, but even just small iterative improvements really have the opportunity to move the needle and change that ratio of time spending down. So I'm the most excited about things like employee onboarding, offboarding, help desk requests. We've actually done some piloting for customer service where we have a knowledge base because the customer service team has done a fantastic job documenting all the questions they get. You can then train your tool of choice to actually have a library of responses available to you. And again, that's not to save money necessarily, but it is, hey, if there's simple questions customers are asking that we could have some type of a chatbot answer directly, you've just save that customer the need to pick up the phone or spend time emailing back and forth. So anyway, those are some basic examples there. It's really exciting to see how this space is going to continue to improve.
Yeah, no, I think it is definitely exciting, even for us technology veterans, to see the pace and see the applications of use cases. I think we'll have to definitely do another session, just you and I, on AI and agentic AI, because the potential of this technology is huge. And as you said, as long as you manage the privacy and the data hygiene around those LLMs and keep them within, and your employees are not sharing everything that's more competitive information, that's the key. And a lot of companies that I'm working with do know the power of this, but are working towards putting the information architecture with LLMs around the data architecture to make sure that they go outside only for things that they need to, but keep everything else inside. So I'm thinking this brews into calling you back to the channel for sure. But just in terms of themes, and I know that we could go on to this, but I think we started with business. We talked a lot about technology. I want to kind of close with business as well. As you mentioned, right, a lot of these things that you kind of did or navigated through are not easy. There's a lot of, and I go back to your themes that you mentioned initially, people, communication, and humans, right? When it comes to doing this and really doing the whole installation versus adoption, I think culture and collaboration, and in its truest essence, is very key, right? Every company, I understand, comes from the top, that the culture is different, the people are different, but at the end of the day, it's all about us, the humans in the firm, right? So what has been your experience in your roles from your vantage point to say that how can you try to influence that culture and collaboration so that you can actually get the team going, not only from within technology, but also from the business side and having them march towards the same mountain?
Yeah, maybe it goes back to how I started around the love of watching my parents impact other humans. No matter what job I am in, that is what I love the absolute most. Excellent. Getting a chance to spend time with other people. And sometimes that's a direct supervisory relationship. And hopefully those people would say that, they've enjoyed the time that I've spent into helping them grow their careers.
Yes.
But just the relational side, my peers in the business, it's really all about relationships, and that is all about trusts. And so IT, you can see the building blocks. IT has to do these things well to get a chance to earn trusts and then be invited strategically to make a difference for what the company is trying to do. Sometimes that's about stakeholder values. Sometimes that's about customer values. Sometimes it's about being a part of a company that has a great mission, etc. So to me, that human side of how I get a chance to spend my time during the day interacting with other people,
Excellent.
that is what brings me the absolute greatest joy. And
Awesome.
it's probably where I spend most of my time as a leader as well, is really helping understand, if I watch a team and I see an opportunity for improvement, how might I be able to inject myself?
Excellent.
I don't like hierarchy in general. I respect that sometimes organizations need hierarchy, but I explain my role to my teams as I'm the offensive lineman. For those that follow American football, my job is to block for them to go run the play that they need to run. And that is usually
awesome.
because they're trying to achieve a specific outcome. So that blocking sometimes is, what communication do I need to be having with people around them? How can I go remove things that are getting in the way of prioritization, et cetera? That metaphor has seemingly worked for 15 years, that if I can be that offensive lineman and help block, I'm really just trying to clear the way for them to be able to go be successful. And that usually then has benefit for them as individuals as they're working to grow their careers. So that's the stuff that I get the most passionate about, is helping people do whatever they want to do in their professional life.
And I've actually truly witnessed it when I was working in your teams. But it's great analogy you put, although you have a baseball slugger in your background, but American football, that's what it's all about. But the key is, as you said, digital leadership is actually a playing sport. You can't lead from the sidelines. You got to be in the game. You got to be playing with it, and you got to kind of carry your troops. So that was a great analogy. I love that. So clearly, you're not an introvert. You love people. Yes, you decompress in different ways. So that's awesome. But you know what? As I said, I could keep going on and on, but I think we definitely need another session. There are a couple of personal things that I love to kind of wrap up this great session with you. Is that, what is a mantra, a book, or a philosophy that you generally use, Rob? Because some of the things that you mentioned are never easy. You have great days, you have bad days, you have, okay days, but there must be some mantra that you follow for your decision making, especially during these challenging times or elsewise.
Yeah, I think I promise I don't have an affiliate deal for this book, but the book that I recommend the most is called Leadership and Self-Deception. And it's book one of a 3-part series. The Arbinger Institute publishes this. But I read that book personally at least once a year. It has helped me so much in my personal life as well as my professional life. I literally buy them in bulk and hand them out to people.
Nice.
And you meet people where they are with their interests in looking to improve themselves. But leadership and self-deception is about getting out of your own way to acknowledge and understand where the other person is coming from in an interaction. And so, again, I think the best thing as a leader you can do is listen, and then act from that. But if teams feel heard, if they feel like they have an active role in solving whatever problem needs to be solved. So that book has made just such a huge difference. I literally could probably speak for a few hours on all the magic in the book.
I always learn about new things when I talk to you. I think our coffee, meetings when we've had some, I've always learned a new book that every time I've met you. So this is great. I'll put the link in the below for the audience and then leverage them to kind of reuse some concepts, because as you said, listen and then act. That's the biggest thing, which doesn't happen. A lot of our professionals, we jump into solving things rather than listening and understanding the problem beforehand. So this is great advice. So since you mentioned that you've been, it helped you both in your professional and elsewhere life, what is something about you, Rob, that, maybe that people that are not inside the press don't know about you, that your colleagues will be surprised to learn about you?
I maybe think the most unique is my undergrad degree is actually in music. And that is surprising to most people, because I've certainly evolved to be, way more technical than what you would assume a music person would be. But I got involved in music with the original belief that I was going to be a music educator. So again, follow my parents' footsteps. I was going to be a band director, whether that was a middle school or a high school band director. And as a part of being a music major, you have to learn how to interpret and then communicate information. And in the case of music, it's a little more abstract. What did the composer have in mind? How do you learn how to communicate? But that put me on a path to really focusing on communication. And I've always felt like in my role, even though I understand technology, I'm not an engineer. So if I can help communicate and be that translator between the technical team and the business team, that's allowed me to be that change agent where I feel like I'm really good. I understand the business. I understand all the metrics that businesses use to evaluate. I also understand the technology, and it's at most businesses, they are way more technical than they realize. And so you need somebody that can be that advocate in the middle to help communicate, sometimes, solve the quarreling that happens very naturally, and hopefully, help great things happen from that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. This is great. The music thing will be great for the audience. They don't see a guitar on the backdrop, but definitely the music. I think it correlates to Fibonacci series, the music and the math. I'm sure it all comes around. You play the glue for the organization, which is phenomenal. So this is good to know. Rob, lastly, where can our audience really follow you or connect with you to learn more? Because I know that this time is not enough justice to kind of really absorb the knowledge, but anything that you want to share in terms of the contact information.
Yeah, I've really got two main channels. LinkedIn is definitely where I probably publish the most, and I'm by no means a content creator, but occasionally, random thoughts about leadership or specific observations there. And then I have a little bit of a Twitter page. It's a little bit more about personal Rob there. Maybe more sports. You see, I love baseball, so I have baseball commentary. I'm LinkedIn. You can find me just as Rob Milstead, and then Twitter or X, I guess now, is just at Rob Milstead. So.
Excellent. I will share that in the comments again. And Rob, thank you so much. As I said, there's so much here, but I'm sure the audience loved it. And we really appreciate your time and all the insights that you did on this channel. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Ash.